Over more than 10 years of playing fantasy football and more than 3 dozen championships won, I have personally found that every single year, basically, the 2 and the 3 spot are my absolute favorite places to pick in fantasy football drafts. And it really does apply to best ball and to redraft leagues as well. We're going over the best draft strategy for picks 1 through 3 in fantasy football in 2024. And of course, I'm giving away free FFN hats to anybody who goes down there, drops a like on the video, is subscribed to the channel, and gives me their hottest take for 2024. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and give me your hottest take for 2024 fantasy football. So the first thing that I want to explain here is we're going to go through ESPN and Underdog and what the strategy is for both platforms and types of fantasy football play. But we're going to go through the differences between the two because it's very important to identify these differences here. So when ESPN, we're typically talking about a 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 or 2 flex, 1 defense, and 1 kicker type of format. So based on that format, we really don't see much of a difference, especially nowadays with the increased value of wide receivers. There's not really a big slant towards running backs as much as there used to be in traditional redraft leagues. Historically, it's what we've seen, and it still is that way to a point, but it's not as slanted as usual. Whereas on Underdog, this is a best ball format, and not only is it important to understand that best ball in particular, you're trying to maximize ceiling at all costs here. Floor is not really in the question when you're drafting on Underdog. It's all about ceiling here. But the other big difference, really the main difference here, is that Underdog leagues are based on a 3 wide receiver format. So 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end, and 1 flex is going to be scoring you points on a weekly basis, whether you like it or not. So that automatically skews the number of wide receivers that are going, as opposed to the running backs that are taken off the board in Underdog drafts. And that's highlighted by just looking at the draft boards right now. When you look on ESPN, there's 9 wide receivers going in the first 24 picks and 10 running backs in the first 24 picks. Now let's look over at Underdog. 17 wide receivers are going on Underdog the first 24 picks compared to 7 running backs. That's almost a 2-to-1 ratio of wide receivers going in the first round compared to running backs. So wide receivers are just way more valuable, which means you just are better off getting a wide receiver at the very least, within the first 2 rounds here. Underdog is just simply different. So when we're looking at ESPN in this particular range, 1 through 3, my favorite draft strategy in this range is to go wide receiver, running back, and then quarterback your first 3 rounds of the draft, and we'll go through exactly the values at those particular spots. And the reason why I like this is because I think that you can maximize your total amount of fantasy points at each position in your particular range. We'll get into the targets here in a minute. But on Underdog, if we're looking at the 1 through 3 range on there, the best 2 strategies that I have found in this range myself are going to be the following. Wide receiver first 2 rounds, quarterback round 3, wide receiver round 4, and tight end round 5. That has a 27.1% advancement rate to your fantasy football playoffs, which almost doubles the amount that you actually start with before you end up drafting. So that increases your chances by making it to the playoffs by 2 times. Now, the other draft strategy that's really strong is wide receiver round 1, running back round 2, quarterback round 3, wide receiver again round 4, and tight end in round 5. That has a 24.8% chance of advancement to the playoffs, and if you get to the semifinals, 2% chance of getting to the semifinals. That's a massive number right there. And to get to the finals, 0.17% chance. Again, that doesn't sound like a lot, but we're literally talking about an Underdog playing with hundreds of thousands of other drafters trying to go for $1 million plus. So there's a small percent chance you make it anyway, but these are the strategies that maximize your chances. So let's go ahead and dive right into the targets on ESPN in the first round. So obviously, your top 3 picks, you got your pick of the litter, right? Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill are your top 3 picks. For me personally, Christian McCaffrey's number 1. I think that even with the injury that he's currently dealing with at the time of this filming, it doesn't really add up to me to pick either of those wide receivers above Christian McCaffrey. We just know the upside that he has is tremendous, and as long as he's healthy for a full season, he's going to be a great fantasy player. Now, I prefer Tyreek Hill over CeeDee Lamb for one reason. One reason only, because these guys are both elite. We're splitting hairs here because they're both elite players. The reason I prefer Tyreek Hill over CeeDee Lamb is because in Miami, there is 2 wide receivers that have real big playability that can take the top off of defense. Jalen Waddle, that wide receiver 2 in Miami, is an elite wide receiver 2 in the NFL. He can take the top off of defense, which means that defensive coordinators can't simply scheme so hard against Tyreek Hill and try to throw double coverage or triple coverage at him all game. They can't take him out of the game because Jalen Waddle could rip him up as well. Dallas has no real wide receiver 2. Is it going to be Brandon Cooks? Is it going to be Jalen Tolbert? We can have an argument, but I think we're all in agreement. Weak number 2 wide receiver. So that's going to leave defensive coordinators to say to themselves, as long as we don't let CeeDee Lamb beat us, we're going to be fine and probably could win this game. So there's going to be a concerted effort every single week. Double, triple coverage on CeeDee Lamb every single week, and that's going to take him out of games. So I just think that Tyreek's big playability is going to be there more frequently than CeeDee Lamb's will. Now let's look over an underdogs list right here. Same exact list of guys, and I have them in the same exact order for the same exact reasons. There's no difference between Best Ball and ESPN on that. So let's move on to rounds 2 and 3. Obviously, when you're picking ranges 1, 2, and 3, you're going to be at that turn in the rounds 2 to 3. So you have a good opportunity here to go ahead and take advantage of that draft strategy that I was just talking about on ESPN. On ESPN, we want to go ahead and draft running back here and then draft our quarterback. Now, based on the draft board here, when you look in this range, there's not really any running backs in our range. And what's important to remember here is that in every single fantasy draft, there is a human element to this where somebody picking in front of you likes a player that has an ADP behind your pick and reaches for a guy, leaving a couple guys to fall in drafts. It happens in every single fantasy draft ever existed. That is just a fact of life in fantasy football. So we're going to account for that human element by adding 2 more guys in front of the ADP that you are allocated. Now, even when we do that, there's no running back in our range here. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to reach on a running back here, which is totally fine to do at that 1, 2, or 3 turn because you're going to be going a long ways without picking again in the 4th round. So the 2 guys that I want to reach for in this range are Devon Achane and James Cook. Achane has the most upside in that range. He has higher upside than Cook, but probably not as high of a floor as James Cook does. So if you prefer the safer guy with a good ceiling, but not as high as the super high ceiling guy, Achane, but with a lower floor, then you might be better off going with James Cook. But if you want to go for that ceiling, go with Devon Achane. Either way, these are the 2 guys that I would want to get if I was going to utilize this draft strategy, which I plan on doing myself in a couple different leagues this year. Now, the guys you want to go for in round 3, when you're looking at that quarterback format, so we've got our wide receiver 1 locked up and our running back 1 locked up. Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes are all in this range. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes is the order I like it in. Josh Allen simply because we know the rushing upside's there, as we do with Jalen Hurts. We just know that Josh Allen actually provides more passing upside than Jalen Hurts does. Sounds a little counterintuitive this year since he has no Stephon Diggs. Really a mystery at wide receiver 1. Josh Allen's going to make it happen. I have no lack of confidence in Josh Allen. And if you want to pick Jalen Hurts, it's really not that big of a deal to me. I definitely prefer Josh Allen, though. And then Mahomes, great consolation prize as well. Obviously, Mahomes can be the quarterback 1. The only reason I prefer Allen and Hurts over Mahomes is because Mahomes doesn't have that rushing upside that's going to get you way more points in fantasy football than those other 2 guys have. Now, let's say you didn't want to do that, right? You didn't want to do that type of draft strategy. There's still good guys in this range. Sam Laporta, if you want to go tight end here, instead of going quarterback, what if you want to go tight end? Sam Laporta in the 3rd round, pretty good pick. Sam Laporta should be the tight end 1 in ESPN, and I've seen quite a bit doing drafts and mock drafts on ESPN. Kelsey's still the number 1 tight end in ESPN. I disagree with it. Dude's in his mid-30s, showed signs of decline last year, so do you think he's all of a sudden going to turn that around? I don't believe that, and you shouldn't either based on history. That does not happen. So Sam Laporta, coming off a legendary tight end rookie year, that's the guy that you really want. And again, wide receivers here, you go with Michael Pittman or Marvin Harrison Jr., you're in good shape. Like, you're in great shape picking those guys. I think that Pittman definitely has the ceiling of a top 12, top 10 wide receiver, and Marvin Harrison Jr. absolutely has a top 10 ceiling as well. Now let's look over at Underdog here. We're going to apply that human element again to Underdog drafts, add up a couple picks here, and we're also going to apply that draft strategy, so we will reach for a couple quarterbacks here as well. Again, look at the strategy right here. You want to go either wide receiver 2 or running back 1 in round 2. Now, in round 2, the guys that I really like in this range, Devon Achane again is front and center for me. That's your guy right there in this ADP range. I think he has the most upside. If he's not there, any of the 4 wide receivers between Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, and Devonta Smith all present best ball upside. These are all guys that have a pretty safe floor for all metrics, but at the same time, all of them have big boom play upside, which is critical to maximize in best ball drafts, especially at the end of the year. Now, Brandon Ayuk is kind of the floater because we don't know exactly where he's going to be as of the time of this filming. You may be watching this, he may be gone, or he may be staying. I think he's going to stay in San Francisco, which is why I actually kind of like drafting Brandon Ayuk on Underdog right now. This dude went from like the wide receiver 12 a couple weeks ago all the way down to the wide receiver 17. So if he ends up staying in San Francisco, which I believe he will, because they have no incentive to trade the guy, they're in win now mode, they don't have to trade him, he's going to end up being a great value in drafts because the ceiling is very high with him. So if you want to draft him today on Underdog, use the link in the comments and sign up with code FFN, and when you deposit $10, they will give you $250 in free bonus cash to play around with. They are literally throwing free money at you so you can go get in some more Underdog best ball drafts or even do some daily pick'ems as well. So join Underdog today using code FFN. And then Malik Neighbors and Devontae Adams, not big fans of them this year. Malik Neighbors, I like him better than Devontae Adams personally in a best ball format because I think there will be big playability with him. Devontae Adams, I just simply don't like the quarterback, and he's at the age cliff that I do not like to see with wide receivers. Love the player, just think we're kind of at a bad time with Devontae Adams now. But the guys that you want to get in the 3rd round, make sure to go out of your way to target these guys. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Again, for the same reasons as we did in ESPN, these guys have great rushing upside, which could absolutely raise a massive ceiling on your fantasy football team. Now let's go to rounds 4 and 5. Again, we're waiting quite a long time before we pick again in the 4th round. On ESPN, here's what we're looking at here. At this point, the wide receivers in this range are just simply better than the running backs in this range. DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, all great picks in the 4th round. All of them are great picks. All of them, again, have a pretty safe floor. Going to be at that wide receiver 15, wide receiver 18 type of floor. But all 3 of these guys, in my opinion, top 12 ceilings in fantasy football for sure. Now, whether or not they all hit is a question that we could definitely discuss. But DJ Moore, I think, has the best shot at hitting that because I believe he'll be the team's #1 target in Chicago. Now, we're looking at 2 great tight ends if you want to go ahead and grab a tight end here. If you want to just go ahead, grab a quarterback, then tight end, be my guest because the tight end options here are elite. Trey McBride and George Kittle here. George Kittle is definitely not my preferred one between himself and Trey McBride, but they're both great picks here at the back of the 4th round, in my opinion. And again, gonna set yourself apart at a onesie position in fantasy football in 2024. And then we're looking at a couple other guys that I like. Cooper Kupp and Kenneth Walker. Cooper Kupp, I like him better in the best ball draft. I think his volatility is really high this year. I don't think his floor is too safe, but I do think his upside is pretty high, which is why I do like him in a best ball format, but not as much in an ESPN format. Kenneth Walker, just really don't like the Zach Charbonnet issue. Going to be sharing touches with Zach Charbonnet for sure, although definitely a very good player if you want to go ahead and grab your running back 2 here. I just like some of the values later on in ESPN for a running back 2. And then if you didn't get your quarterback, if you didn't get it in round 3, Anthony Richardson in round 5 is going to be a great option. Now let's look at Underdog here. Underdog, again, we're applying that draft strategy 5 rounds deep here, and going with a tight end is your priority in this particular range, and you're in luck. Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, that's what you want to do. That is what you want to do. Either one of those guys in this particular order, that's what you want to do here in round 4. All of them have super high upside to be the tight end 1, tight end 2, tight end 3 in fantasy football this year. if everything works out. And again, you want to take the shot on best ball, so you better do it in this particular range with a tight end here. Again, you didn't get quarterback, don't be too upset. Mahomes and Lamar Jackson are typically still available in this range based on ADP. They're both great options in fantasy football for obvious reasons. And then the wide receivers here, I like T. Higgins. I've taken him plenty of times. I think his upside's high, but again, sort of the Cooper Kupp, Jalen Waddle thing, where his floor's not that high. I don't think his floor's even as high as Jalen Waddle's. But I do think the upside is obviously very high if he stays healthy and Joe Burrow stays healthy. And then Christian Kirk and Terry McLaurin, just not as excited to pick those guys in a best ball format. I just don't think that either one of them has tremendous upside. When we're talking about a fantasy points per game perspective, they're both not really that high, just based on the last couple years here. So I would just kind of stay away with it, especially when we're applying this draft strategy in a best ball format. So let me know what you think of the draft strategy in the comments below. And if you want to see the truth about the double hero running back strategy that you probably have not heard, click on this video right here.